Hamza came at the right time and he did the right thing at that very moment. But when everything started to balance out, he kind of kept the extremist views. And at this point, when everything is more balanced out and he's now shifting it in the wrong direction, that's when damage starts to happen. So that is why I felt the need to call him out on that. I noticed that nobody was actually speaking to Hamza and actually trying to help him. I mean, he's got all of these very wealthy friends who he claims are the best people in the world alongside himself, but none of them brought it up with him. I think the only person who actually gave him any valid feedback was Chris Williamson. He's influencing millions and millions of young men, and these millions of young men are going to be taking control of the future.
Welcome back to the Perform Well podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're looking for performance and wellness optimization so that you can not only smash your career, but also have a better life, better relationships, and better health. We believe that performance and wellness are yin and yang and work together. So listen in as we dive into topics that are going to help you optimize your life for the better. Welcome back to another episode of the Perform Well podcast. And today we have a special guest, Regan Nice, a young entrepreneur. I believe you're 19 years old, is that right? Smashing it, mate. Smashing it. Like, what we're going to dive into today is honestly an incredible story of a young entrepreneur who is making waves at the moment on YouTube and other platforms too. So, where are you at the moment, Regan?
At the moment, I'm in, I think it's pronounced Samut Prakan in Thailand.
Lovely, man. Is that why the Wi-Fi connection issues you had earlier were coming up?
Yeah, unfortunately, man, it's like hotel Wi-Fi is not always the best.
Yeah, I figured so. So if anyone were listening in, his Regan Kyle for any reason, that's why. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
We should be golden.
Yeah, should be good.
Should be golden. Right, Regan, we just want to talk a little bit about yourself. So we want to get an insider to you to start with. We like stories, we like to talk to our guests and kind of learn what goes on in your lives. So for yourself, you're an entrepreneur. Sure. Can we learn a little bit more about yourself? Why do you do what you do at this point in time?
For sure. Yeah, so I have to go a little bit into my story for that then. So I've always had a bit of an entrepreneur spirit. It's like when I was younger, I used to do a bunch of entrepreneurship related things. I used to try and sell stuff at school. Eventually I got into, I had like a skill set from working on cars and stuff. So I started building go-karts. I started selling go-karts. I built like this really big go-kart that was pretty fancy and whatever, sold that. So I always kind of did entrepreneurship stuff from the start, just trying to kind of make money. There were points where my dad and I were struggling financially, so I was trying to basically support where I could. And then it eventually brought me into the online space, you know, with all the online business models and everything going on around there. And I kind of learned how to do it online, how to actually make money online. And yeah, from that point, I'm here now where I am, for the longest time, I've been running a digital content marketing agency. And now I'm transitioning into a growth operating model where I help people to scale their businesses. So that is what I'm currently working on.
Very nice. Very nice. Appreciate you going into depth there, mate. Obviously, we wanted to talk on the topic of we're a performance and wellbeing podcast too. And we also like working on self-development and the journey people have been on for self-development. Now, for yourself, what was one of the reasons that you started to think, actually, I'm going to go down this entrepreneurship journey and start to develop your own self-worth, self-wellbeing and push on from there?
For sure, man. So I think for me, it started how it starts for a lot of young entrepreneurs, which is, to be honest, a hatred of authority. And I know a lot of young entrepreneurs can relate to this. It's like when I was growing up, when I was at school and everything, and just being pushed down a system and in a way controlled, I didn't like it at all. And I was just like, I just need to take control of my own stuff. And being a youngster, not going to university, not having qualifications, people don't really take you seriously in the job market at all. So at that point, I was like, if I want to make it and I actually want to make moves at my age, then I have to take it into my own hands because nobody else is going to hand it to me on a silver platter.
That's a good observation. I mean, I would probably say, you know, I agree with that. Like when I was 15, I was exactly the same. I didn't like being told what to do. I still don't. Like me and Dan have this conversation every now and then. I would probably say that a lot of entrepreneurs I would have some kind of like level of don't want to be told what to do. I would say, I would agree with that.
It's a superiority complex, isn't it? At the end of the day, like I said this to someone, I moved from working for people to working by myself. I think I'd have a real struggle these days working for someone without allowing myself to kind of creatively explore everything else that was around. Because at the end of the day, we're all thinkers. When you're working as an entrepreneur, you're a thinker, you're the ideas guy. And when that's taken away from you, I find you have this empty hole that you can't work through, and it makes it very difficult at that point in time. So I'm sure a lot of viewers as well will probably resonate with that in a way that it's quite tough when you get the ideas and creativity stripped out of you. So saying like education system, not to get too political, but it does strip that creativity to kind of shoehorn you down this certain methodology that you must learn this way, you must learn these specific topics, and this is then going to obviously elevate your career later down the line, which isn't necessarily true, because there's this other path that we can take as well. And I think we always forget about that kind of like fork in the road. Now, obviously, you've ventured down the YouTube scene. You're growing on the YouTube scene rapidly at the minute. And one of the key topics we wanted to talk about is, I'd argue, with a conversational video that you did on Hamza, which blew up and you got over 200k views on. And we want to just delve a little bit deeper into that, about Hamza and how the conversation came up that you wanted to then talk about this on your platform.
For sure.
So for yourself, with Hamza then, what was the reason of creating the video?
So my original reasoning for kind of starting my criticism of him, I actually started with the video where I called him out for a fight, is because I saw him going down a path of almost pride and egotism. And from personal experience and from a lot of people that I've known as well, pride comes before a fall. It's like an irrefutable law of the universe, which is that if you're going to trip on your ego and go down the path of pride, you're eventually going to lose everything. Everything that you've worked for, you're going to lose it. So I noticed that nobody was actually speaking to Hamza and actually trying to help him. I mean, he's got all of these very wealthy friends who he claims are the best people in the world alongside himself, but none of them brought it up with him. I think the only person who actually gave him any valid feedback was Chris Williamson. So I saw him going down the wrong path, and I wanted to call him out and kind of try and bring him back to the right path, because number one, he's going to lose everything if he continues on his egotistical path, and number two, he's going to do a lot of damage in the long run to his fans, and also, like, in the long run, maybe create some sort of difficult, like, what's the word I'm looking for, like almost generational curse in a way, if we can put it like that, because he's influencing millions and millions of young men. And these millions of young men are going to be taking control of the future when everybody else, like the next generation, always takes control of everything. And to me, with the message Hamza was putting out, it didn't seem to me like it would be a good thing for people that are following him to be in control of stuff in the long run, you know? So I tried to call him out and warn him. And the reason I did it in a 3-part series is to be fair to him. I actually changed it up a little bit by doing an analysis on his apology video, but originally it's supposed to be a 3-part call out. Number 1 was the fight and to call him out personally. Number 2 was to specifically do a little bit of damage to him so that he would take the situation seriously. And the third one is the nail in the coffin, basically.
Got it. And for those that don't know who Hamza is, I mean, obviously on the YouTube scene, he's massive. I'm not sure about the Instagram scene so much. I haven't really looked into it. But for those that don't know who he is there something that you can like give us in terms of his message that is the thing that caused you to hit out against him in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So I think originally his message had a place. So this was right around I believe he started in 2019, going on to 2022. Right around then, masculinity was so suppressed that it's ridiculous. I mean, everybody who spoke out everybody who spoke out trying to protect masculinity was getting silenced, was getting deplatformed and attacked massively. So whenever something is suppressed, people take extremist views on it it's just like a natural law of the universe. People take extremist views because they're now trying to push their agenda on the other side. So Hamza came at the right time and he did the right thing at that very moment. But when everything started to balance out, he kind of kept the extremist views. And at this point, when everything is more balanced out and he's now shifting it in the wrong direction, that's when damage starts to happen. So that is why I felt the need to call him out on that.
Now, you go on.
Yeah, so I just want to continue along this theme for a second, because that's obviously good stuff that you mentioned in regards to the direction he was going. But what was his stance on things that you see from your point of view that made him dangerous to the situation as a whole?
Okay, so for me, what's making him dangerous is the fact that he's taking a very polarized view of things. So I believe that this was useful in the past, but not at this point, because people need to move on to a more balanced life now. So he'll take very polarized views, like very strong red pill beliefs. It's like belief, I don't know if this is an exact belief of his, but stuff like, oh, women should be in the kitchen, These types of very extreme beliefs that come alongside masculinity, which is being suppressed. You get massive, like, red pill beliefs, and you get dangerous beliefs like, oh, if a person is not making a certain amount of money, then they lose their value as a human being. Because that is the undertone of the message that people like Hamza and people like Andrew Tate are portraying. It's like, oh, you're a brokey. So you then have a generation of young boys from the age of 14 to 17, sometimes 18-year-old and above, who are taking in this information, and then it's forming their beliefs over time. And you can look at the data over the internet. I mean, data doesn't tell you anything until you see it happening in person. Somebody who I was in contact with was speaking to me about the fact that he saw Hamza's fans at the gym, and it was very interesting to him that he was seeing people talking about the stuff in real life. It's like, if you're not a NoFap, you're a Jeffrey. If you play video games, you're a Jeffrey. Jeffrey is Hamza's character that he uses to illustrate people doing the wrong habits. It's like all of these things, putting labels on people, saying to them basically, if you don't follow Hamza's way of life, then you're a piece of garbage. And I think a massive generation of youngsters having these ideas is a very bad thing.
Do you think, in a way then, going on to the topic of combining Andrew Tate's views in there, do you think, in a way, from where we were, let's say around the 2017 to 2019 mark, when obviously we had this kind of immense level of masculinity being thrown to try and bring up, the masculinity that people were feeling at that point in time, do you find that, as you say, it's balanced out a bit now? Do you think it will spike again?
Look, I think that it has balanced out to a point now, but whenever something takes an extremist view, everything in life is about pendulums. There's always the balance point, and then the pendulum swings around based on whoever's fighting for the one side, whoever's fighting for the other side. I think masculinity has gone too far. I mean, you have people like Myron from Fresh and Fit shouting at the top of his lungs on camera, and that is a very extremist view, and he tells women in his podcast to shut up and get out when he doesn't agree with what they're saying. To me, that's a very extreme level of almost toxic masculinity at that point. So it swings all the way to the right now, and now people are going to start trying to swing it to the left. So what I think is going to happen is I think it's going to be the opposite now until everything eventually balances out. I think we're going to have a lot of extreme leftist views almost, and a lot of people, which you're already starting to see, a lot of people attacking these YouTubers, and like there's a kind of a movement that's going on now, which is the exposing guru movement. I mean, a lot of these guys are now being exposed and spoken against because they've taken it too far. Now they have to be brought back.
It's actually really interesting because, like, you could sort of paint similarities between, like, let's just say the typical extreme left and the now where we're kind of going into, far right groups now starting to gain popularity in countries. And for example, like, I don't know what country you're from, Regan, but in the UK, we've obviously got quite a few riots at the moment because of immigration issues, which are leading to a more far right kind of rioting at the moment than usual. And you can see that across the board, like, the rise of wars going on, people like, Trump, who, in theory will be right, not left. People like that are obviously gaining a lot of power, and you can see the world is tilting towards that direction. Now, we have had quite, a few decades, especially in America, where it's been left-leaning, liberal policies, and wokeism, as we call it, is obviously taken a massive rise over the last 10 years. And we've seen the outcome of that. We've seen transgender issues becoming more mainstream. There's a lot of positive stuff with this as well. Like, I'm not saying it's a negative thing in any means, but there's also a lot of negatives that come with it, and it is causing issues. So would you say this is just one part of the big picture when it comes to masculinity and Hamza and what he's talking about, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, how do billionaires make their money? They swing the pendulum on a massive scale. I mean, if you take two billionaire groups, I won't name any specific ones, but let's say you take two billionaire groups and they have the pendulum in the middle. This one yaps, then this one yaps, and it swings the pendulum. And as you swing the pendulum, billions and billions of people's beliefs are being influenced, whether that's on the far left or on the far right. And the swing of the pendulum makes them billions and billions of dollars. I mean, that's pretty much the only way that these guys, and especially the platforms, we live in the age of platforms. It's very important for the platforms to be able to swing beliefs on a mass scale in order for them to make money. So I think on the large scale, there was this documentary that I watched. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it was called Everything is a Rich Man's Game. Because the further you go up the scale, you realize everything is just a business move on some level.
No, I completely agree with you. Like, I think the world is obviously transverse, and as soon as you get into entrepreneurship, you realize how many things are transverse by business and in that way. Now, the interesting thing, obviously, about Hamza, he has a very mixed profile in terms of like what his YouTube's like, because he's done a lot of fitness stuff, he's done a lot of self-improvement stuff, and then he's also come in, obviously, with this kind of more toxic masculinity movement, as you say, about being a man, what it takes to be a man, how you get to that level. Now, on the other swing of it, do you find that toxic masculinity, with some regard, brings about toxic femininity as well?
To a degree, because this is a little bit of controversial belief maybe, but it is the men of society who dictate how the woman will behave. So take a look at TikTok and stuff, for example, with all of the dancing and shaking ass and OnlyFans and all of this. It's created an impact on the way that modern women are. That's kind of undeniable. It's like everybody these days kind of struggles to find a good woman because the weakest men are in control of the social media platforms. It's the weak men who are spending money on OnlyFans. It's the weak men who are allowing women's egos to get off the charts on social media because they keep throwing money at them and acting like a bunch of simps, to put it lightly. So I think the toxic masculinity aspect of things will also have a massive impact on it, and it has, because you'll see these street interviews where people are walking up to women asking them, listen, how much money should a man make in a year? And they're like, oh, $500,000. I mean, women don't understand money to that degree at all, but it's like they expect a man to be making $500,000 a year in order for her to see him as worthy, because you've got all of the toxic masculinity influencers being like, I drove a fucking Bugatti when I was 19 years old, and I was on a yacht when I was in the womb. I'd already made my first $1 million before I was born. It's like all of these guys paint a very poor picture of what the truth actually is. So then you have women who consume it on social media, and they're like, oh, well, all men should be making $500,000 at that point.
What I want to come in for a little bit is on more of a well-being talk. We're our well-being podcast too. How much influence do you think these kind of changes in societal structure have had on both the well-being of men and women?
It's had, in my opinion, a massive impact on the well-being of men and women. I don't know if this statistic has been updated yet, but you could see there was a massive increase in male suicides over the last 10, 20 years, I think. I think it was updated in 2016, but it is an exponential increase. I can't remember exactly what the statistic was, but at the same time, it's creating a separation between men and women. I mean, all of this stuff is just creating a separation between people. So you have men who are trying their best to find a woman, and you have women who are trying their best to find a higher value man. So it's impacting men's mental health because they're becoming lonely. They're becoming depressed. I mean, you can see the shift on social media. If you go to Instagram comments where someone's like showing off their girlfriend or something, you got guys in there making jokes like, "Oh, I'm feeling really intimate with my shotgun at the moment." Like, you can see the effect of it. And at the same time, you have women who are in their 30s completely depressed because they don't have a husband, and they have a very low chance of finding one because they're expecting to find a millionaire husband at the age of 30 with 2 kids, where she already has 2 kids from a previous man. So everybody's expectations of things are being completely skewed by this stuff.
Apologies for interrupting the podcast. We know you're getting fully engrossed into this episode, and we really appreciate you stopping on the video on YouTube or on Spotify if you found us through one of the search pages. Make sure to leave a review and a subscription if you haven't already. But we just wanted to interject a point here that me and Nick have 15 years of coaching experience between us, and it's only getting better as we've got better guests on the podcast. The only way we can do that, though, is with the growth of our program that we've just released. We've got a 12-month Perform Well program, which has just dropped, and we'd love you guys to get involved in it. If you want to learn more details, make sure to head to the description, as we've got our website in there, which can give you a full overlay of the program. We're looking to help career-driven professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anyone dominate their life by improving their lifestyle. Me and Nick like to claim ourselves as experts in this area, and if you want to check out some of our other transformations, I'm sure you do. We've got some amazing people who have performed so well off the back of this program. Have a cracking day, and we really appreciate your time. Let's get back to the podcast. I mean, where do we think things are going to go in this instance then? If we were going to talk some kind of helpful ways that men can start to almost feel more empowered in a way. For yourself, Regan, what kind of habits do you do for yourself to help yourself feel more empowered on a day-to-day basis?
For me to make myself feel more empowered, I mean, look, everything is a mental game. Thoughts become emotions become actions shape your reality. So it's all about controlling your thoughts to a degree. So for me, it's not so much the habits that I do, it's the stuff that I avoid doing. It'll be like waking up in the morning. The worst thing that you can do is get on your phone and start scrolling on Instagram and start seeing a bunch of opinions of whatever person is trying to rile you up on social media, because that's how social media works, is you rile people up, you get people to feel an emotional impact, and a lot of the time those emotions are negative. So you go on social media first thing in the morning, start scrolling, you see a bunch of negative news and see like, oh, World War III is on the way and whatever, and all of this BS that is just designed to get views basically, then it's going to ruin your day. So it's certain habits that allow you to be in control of your thoughts, because if you control your thoughts, you control your emotions. If you control your emotions, you control everything.
Love it. And do you think that's something that most men are lacking, is that ability to, control their minds? Is that what's causing the issues in the first place?
I think a lot of society in general is failing to understand that they need to be in control of their thoughts, because it all boils down to delayed and instant gratification in the macro scale. It's like you've got all of the stuff available that's going to make you feel good right now. At the same time, you feel kind of bad every single day because you don't have the life that you want. So what's the best way to counteract that is to take instant gratification things. I mean, you go on social media, Pornhub's a fucking Google search away. You got all of this stuff at men's disposal. So what does that mean? It means they're going to have a very difficult time controlling their emotions. And a lot of men these days are very emotionally driven, which unfortunately makes a bit of a weak man if you are completely emotionally driven, and makes dangerous men as well at the same time. So I think it's very important for men to try and focus on, at the very least, being aware of their thoughts and being aware of how their thoughts are kind of shaping their reality.
That's awesome. That's actually a really good observation. Like, I've always heard that, in the last 10 years, women are more emotionally intelligent than men, is what normally comes about when you talk to a lot of women. But actually, when you think about the situation, like, men have to be so emotionally intelligent not to like cause themselves to do destructive things, because a man has high levels of testosterone. There's more chance of causing damage and aggression. You have to be able to control that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that aren't controlling their tendencies. So it's interesting. It is interesting.
I do want to flip in here a little bit as well, because I understand obviously the discretion between genders and how genders obviously behave. But do you think there's ever going to come a time when we just associate ourselves as kind of, people with regards, like trying to, I think at the end of the day, we keep segregating genders. This gender does this gender does that. And personally, I would like to kind of see it more come as kind of a collusive thing, where we're saying actually overall we're all learning the same kind of skill set. It's not how it used to be in the Victorian times, when women were learning to sew and cook and men were learning how to do manual labour. I think there is obviously some kind of convulsiveness. Regan, do you think there will be a time when this happens, when we get a nice balanced structure in society where we're not just ebbing and flowing from these extreme natures between genders?
I don't know, to be honest. And for me personally, I've never seen a successful relationship where there is not a polarization between the masculine and the feminine. Because opposites attract. That's everything in nature. I mean, you put two magnets with the north pole to each other, they repel. You put the north to the south, they attract. So I think there has to be a degree of polarization between men and women. And I think the issues that are arising is, to be honest, that society wants men and women to be the same, but we're not. And I think if we realized just the differences between us and the differences between how we think and how we behave. I mean, men are primarily driven by logic, women are primarily driven by emotions. So, I mean, sadly, we all have to kind of understand emotional control. But I think if we understand the differences between each other and we stop trying to bring each other into our own worlds, and we accept, okay, I'm male, not necessarily gender roles and whatever, but just accepting masculine energy and accepting feminine energy, and accepting, okay, I'm a man, I'm more comfortable in my masculine energy. My wife is more comfortable in her feminine energy. So I'm not going to try and change her. I don't want her to try and change me. We just coexist and act in a polarized way to each other with the masculine and feminine energy. I think that is what creates the actual love in a relationship.
Yeah, you know what's interesting with that as well. Like, if you ask anyone, what's it like to be masculine, or what's it like to be feminine? Common sense, and like you would probably be able to describe what someone feminine would be like quite easily, and what someone masculine would be like. But the big thing at the moment is that we're trying to have this debate about what is it to be masculine and what is it to be feminine, and the wires are getting crossed. Like they're saying that women can be just as masculine as a man can just be as feminine as a woman. And there are instances where, men have more femininity, and it's not always the worst thing. Like, my brother's quite feminine in some ways, but it makes him very loving and warm. And then there's also the opposite. I've seen girls that could probably beat the shit out of me in a street fight, be quite masculine and, business driven. But does it make him happy is the question. And like Jordan Peterson brought out the science to suggest that humans, males and females, are more similar than we are different. We do have more similarities than we do differences. However, there are distinct differences in terms of more agreeableness in a female as opposed to a man on average, and a man's more disagreeable, and largely influenced by the way our brains have been structured over, evolution. and through hormonal impacts and the way our bodies are built, you know, and our role as a male, you know, in terms of, see, we can't have babies ourselves, but we can obviously spread our seed as wide as possible. And women have to be more selective about who they let into their body because they can only have one child and need someone to look after it. And I think at the moment there's so much division just because society can't quick figure out, you know, what we've evolved to figure out all this time, that there is a distinct difference between man and woman, and we should be appreciative of those differences. And there are some people that will fit blur the lines a little bit. Like I'm talking about obviously intersex as one of the ones with the boxer recently. What are your thoughts when it comes to the Olympics with that boxer that was intersex fighting the female?
Bro, to me, like, it's not fair at all. I mean, I think we need to put up a massive fight against that, because me right now, I could inject myself with female hormones and then go and compete in women's boxing. I would be able to probably fight 5 women at once and still win. And that's not me. That's not me bragging. That's just, we have certain differences between us as men and women. Men are physically stronger. Women are emotionally stronger and way more emotionally intelligent than us. So if you try to put men in women's sports, you got men who have more physically capable bodies going up against women who have less physically capable bodies a lot of the time. Obviously, you're going to put masculine testosterone to a degree and a masculine frame up against petite feminine woman. They're going to get destroyed. So I don't think that this intersexual, transsexual Olympics is fair in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially with this particular case, because, you know, I've researched into it, and you have the XY chromosomes of a male, they have internal testicles of a male, they also have the external genitalia of a female. So when they were born, they were classified as a female because in the country it was illegal to be trans, right? And so when you come out of the womb and you've got nipples and you've got a vagina, guess what? 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to put down that's a girl, right? So they grew up as a girl, but they did go through some of the changes that a male goes through puberty. And it does raise a concern that their higher levels of testosterone and hormones and the way the body's designed, it could be an unfair advantage. Now, this is the average. Obviously, we talk about the average because there are women in this world that will beat up men, for sure, 100%. I've seen it. Ronda Rousey could probably beat up most men in the bar. However, we're talking about the top, 5 to 10% of men are going to always beat every single female on the planet. Like, there's going to be a slight average that's higher than the female. And I like how you also brought in that women have strengths too, because they really do. And I don't think they get, don't get talked about enough. I don't think people talk about how amazing women are at being able to nurture and bring people together and glue people together and be the head of a family in terms of the emotional support and backbone. They don't get enough of that. And I think like the way we could potentially shift from this masculinity talk is actually talking positive about what female brings to the party, because they bring so much. And I think, as you said earlier, like I think men are the reason why women react the way they do, is because we're the ones driving the decisions. We're the ones that want their attention. We're the ones that want them to do what we want them to do. And women are just responding to us being a certain way. And so, yeah, mate, like this is very eye-opening stuff. And like at the start of this conversation, didn't know much about you, Regan. Obviously, I've seen some of your stuff online. Joe spoke about you. It's easy to see from when you post stuff that you would assume that you're a red pill type of person, right, from the outside, right? And with that comes a lot of, baggage. He means, he's a misogynist, he's this kind of thing, blah, 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 blah. But actually, listening to you speak, mate, there's nothing like that whatsoever. I think you bring some fair points.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you've covered a lot of good points there, mate. You've really covered a lot of good points there. In terms of just wrapping things up, now, Regan, what for yourself, if you're a fly on the wall in your own life, you're only 19, but if you could speak to some of the younger people that maybe watch this podcast, or even people around your age range, and mine and Nick's age range, if you're a fly on the wall, what would you give as one solid piece of advice to someone watching this right now when they don't quite feel themselves?
For somebody who's watching this right now, they don't quite feel themselves. It is about finding balance. The universe runs on a very balanced law. So you observe the flow of pendulums. I keep bringing up pendulums. It's about keeping that pendulum in the middle, in the balance point. And once you achieve balance, then you kind of go with the flow of life in a way. It's like Bruce Lee said, be like water, my friend. So it's always about finding that balance and not going to a very polarizing extremist view. Otherwise, you're going to be going against the flow of the universe in a way. So keeping that balance and being in control of your thoughts at every waking moment, or at the very least trying to be aware of them and trying to control them so that you can control your emotions. So one small piece of advice is start meditating and learn to be aware of your thoughts.
I love that. That's the most distinct bit of advice I think I've heard so far, man. Like from some of our guests, to be fair.
I appreciate it, man.
Like you struck it from the core, the foundation, because like when people think of change, they're thinking, well, how do I change? What's the very first step to change? And I think you nailed it, because if you can't get clear here and you're distracted by everything, you can't then do anything else. Nailed it, bro.
100%.
Nailed it. I like that. That's good.
I agree.
Appreciate it, bro. Appreciate it.
I think on the end there, is there anything you'd like to add into the end there, Regan? Otherwise, we will wrap up.
I think that's everything on my side, unless you guys have maybe got like any last questions.
Well, we've got to plug you.
Well, oh yeah, we'll plug you. So we'll round off there anyway, and we'll plug obviously where we are with this. So thank you very much for coming on, Regan. We really do appreciate it. It's been such a fantastic chat
you guys
and
having
insight.
me.
That's all right. It's been a pleasure, mate. It's an insight, obviously, into your life and into how you're doing on YouTube, because you're doing amazing things over there. So just so the audience know where to find you, we'll put it all in the description. Where can people find you? What can people watch? And let them know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you guys having me on, and obviously looking forward to seeing the end product, seeing how the podcast comes out.
Mm-hmm. That's good, my man. Where can people find you on YouTube, just so people can go to your on there?
Sorry, man. My YouTube channel is @ReganNice. It's just my name. And my Instagram account as well is @ReganNice. I don't post so much valuable stuff on my Instagram. It's like more of a fun page for me. But on my YouTube, I'm going to be posting a lot more valuable stuff in the near future. So if you guys want to have a look at that, it's just my name on YouTube.
Cool. Fantastic, my man. Thank you ever so much. And thank you ever so much for watching this as well. We will hopefully be back in the studio recording very soon, but we really appreciate, obviously, any online guests we get, such as yourself, Regan. Obviously, we're getting to talk to people in Thailand, which is mad. And thank you guys, as I say, for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe, drop us a follow, drop us a 5-star. We're nearly at 100 subscribers for the podcast, which is amazing for us. We're crossing into the 20,000 views scene as well. And you guys have been so supportive of us over the last nearly 2 years now. You guys have been doing absolutely superb. And yeah, just make sure to drop us a little follow, and we'll catch you guys later.